So just batten down the hatches, here we go. It's going to be worse than ever. There's some things I thought, of course, I'll give a much better presentation on the plane tomorrow, as I reflect on what I should have said, but some things came to mind that might be helpful as I would kind of wrap up that scorecard piece, or at least finish, peppering you with changing that. A couple of things about it. One way you can go at it is take the typical resources that we use to pull off church and just reallocate them for community engagement, for kingdom kinds of expressions. So you take prayer, take people, time, money, facilities, technology, and we know how to use these to keep our churches running. But what you could begin to do is to develop some scorecard pieces or celebration pieces around each of these elements. Like, for instance, just as an example, you actually can know how many of your folks are prayer walking your neighborhoods. And it's amazing stuff that happens when people start prayer walking their neighborhoods, because God actually shows them stuff. Now, you don't even have to be Pentecostal to believe this, but not only does God show them stuff, then God opens up conversations and stuff like that. Well, when do we ever ask, how many of you are or one congregation, I wrote them an email, said, they were asking about that. I said, well, you've got a county fair, and every community's got some kind of festival or ochre festival or something, frog leg or something or other. And so I said, why don't you just put up a prayer booth at your fair and county fair? And of course, now I had in my mind YWAM, their booth. You spill out, you connect with people, you ask them. But I used the word booth, so they heard booth. So they sent me a picture of a booth with neon signs, free prayer here, and I thought, this is the cheesiest thing I've ever seen. Why didn't God just kill me before he let me make that suggestion to these people? And, but, then they sent me pictures of people standing in line.
Wow, yeah.
Because people are that desperate. Now, you and I don't wake up wondering whether God has our back or not, whether or not the world's a friendly place of, purpose and meaning and intelligence. Imagine waking up in this culture right now, in this day and age, not knowing if any of it makes sense, or if it's just, you talk about terrifying. So, there are all kinds of ways that we can begin to, celebrate prayer in more external, how many folks are praying for their teachers, all that kind of thing. I'm looking at both of these together. Of course, people are more than resources, they're kind of the point, but time, people's gifts, talents. I was at a Presbyterian church, First Pres in Gainesville, Georgia, earlier this year, and every year they have a missions week. And just like churches that do capital campaign or budget, annual budget pledges where people, decide to declare how much money they're going to give to the budget, they have a missions week, and part of that every year is for people to declare how many hours of community service they're going to do. And their goal was 14,000 or 17,000 hours, something like that. And on the back of that, they had like 24 organizations that their church works with, from YMCA to Boys Club to, just on and on and on. I thought, now that is brilliant. That is smart. Because what that says to folks is, we believe that a normative expression of the Christian life, and particularly as y'all move in as a tribe to, hanging with Jesus or whatever, I can't remember all the points, hanging with Jesus, becoming like Jesus, whatever. We think that's normal then, that you would love your neighbor. Jesus wouldn't just make that scripture. But maybe he was serious about that. How many people use your facility could be another, way of measuring or at one congregation started a recovery ministry, and they were counting cigarette butts in the parking lot. And they wanted that number to go up. You know, because that meant, you know, we're reaching a lot more folks out there. And then, of course, technology, I have no idea. But the point being, you could just begin to celebrate some lead factors in each of these areas that will produce for you some results on community impact down the way. Another way that you can go with this in terms of celebration is around key issues. So maybe it's, you know, maybe it's feeding, you know, it's food issues. And y'all started an urban farm of how large? 1 acre. 1 acre. Now, and so, you know, how many folks work on this thing? The 3 of you. Okay. Okay, so slave labor and or child labor, I should say.
I didn't have to say it.
I know it. Jason's up here like he can barely use his hands to write on that. It's so gnarled from overwork. He was out separating butter beans last night. You know, it just kind of gets under your thumbs. All right, so I'm just wondering how many of us have land that we could farm. And I don't. You won't think I'm making this up, but I'm in northwest Alabama near Huntsville, and this Methodist pastor, he says, I've got 57 acres. I don't know why in the world the church felt like they needed 57 acres, you know. And I said, are you serious? I said, you're in a food desert, and you've got 57 acres, you know. So they started farming, and they started a cafe up on Main Street. And so, I mean, you can take issues like that. Or it could be that you could, maybe this is how many pounds. I've got one client that does 1,900 backpacks every Friday, 6 pounds each, food, kids, Northwest Houston, you know, that go home over the weekend so these kids can eat. And one of their things is they keep tabs of the number of hungry children in that school district, and they're trying to drive that number to 0. Well, that's a number you can track, and that's a number you can celebrate. Or I'm thinking of what doesn't matter. I mean, or maybe it's foster care is your, you know, one. And I'm realizing now, Ben Sands, some of you know Ben. Jim was just telling me about some of the stuff that's going on in the state of Oregon. With the work there, and what an incredible story that is statewide, but you know, to get this down to a local community, you know, I've had several pastors who've taken it as one of the calls of God, you know, to get the church, not a church, the church in an area, to make sure that there's no kid in the foster program that doesn't have adoption and doesn't have support for transitioning out of the system. NotInMyCity.org is one organization. Of course, you got out here in the Central Valley, you've got a lot of different things going on in terms of, is it Jenny Christensen out here with Courage Homes, Courage Houses, Courage to Be, Courage, Jenny Christensen, Jenny Williamson, you know, my good friend Jenny, whose last name escapes me, I was here in Sacramento, and she put together 1,500 people at a conference about sex trafficking and human trafficking, and she's building homes for women to come out of this where they in a safe place, where their identities can be scrubbed, the law enforcement's involved, their kids are moved in with them. I mean, these folks play for keeps. So I don't, you know, that's another way of doing school. Or it could be how many folks are every congregation that I work with, it says, how do we, you know, we have a heart for the community. What's our engagement point? You know, you don't even have to pray about getting involved in schools. I mean, you don't have to pray about it. You don't ask God what he thinks, because he's just going to tell you yes. So everything that's going on, every situation, every current of societal problems, whatever, is manifesting in the local school system. So what happens there on the front door of engagement, maybe he's helping kids with literacy. Got one client in Fort Worth, about 800 volunteers read 1 hour a week to 2 kids, Read to Win. And they're taking literally dozens and hundreds of kids off the at-risk list for literacy. And they're targeting first grade. They're not waiting till the 3rd grade where the gaps are big. That's where the state test and that's where the big declension is. So they're getting them, because these kids are coming into the school system running 2 and 3 million word deficits. They literally have not heard the language. So they have no concept of colors. 1 out of 6 kids entering kindergarten, public kindergarten in this country, will not know their full name. They will not know a color. They'll not know a number, because no one has sat with them and talked with them and put, it's beyond astonishing. But these kids, and literally their brains are maldeveloped, because, and particularly at the point of the relational building, because they've not had positive adult relationships that fill in, neuroscience, this is one of the frontiers of neuroscience right now, is the relational, how critical positive relationships are for brain development, particularly with young children. And so, even if your folks, don't use the word mentor, it scares people off, but, well, I'm not a mentor. All you have to do is give a kid 30 minutes of positive adult, focus, whether it's reading or something, and these kids that we think are slow suddenly come up to speed, because their brains develop. Literally, they develop around that. So, that's another way of going at being able to celebrate a different scorecard. And I just work it like that. So I wanted to kind of not finish it, that discussion. That's not finished. But as you customize a scorecard around what God's asking your congregation to do, or what party He's asking you to call in your community, so a bunch of people can come around it, those are just some ideas. But by the way, and I want to answer this question, I want to move to the leadership discussion, because you wouldn't still be here after lunch if your life was not void of anything else to do except church leadership. So I'm going to honor the fact that you must be that desperate. So I want to spend the rest of the time on leadership issues related to making this shift. But, yes, sir, Paul. You bet.
Would you speak to the importance of our getting started, and it's okay to start small?
I do want to speak to that. Pastor Binion here is talking about starting, so if I can talk about that in context of my...
I know many times, in some of our churches, we look at other churches, we see them feeding hundreds, feeding thousands.
Good point.
But it's okay to start with 2 or 3 or 5.
Sure is. Let me just go ahead and talk about that now. I don't know why I'm putting it. So his point is well, mate, you're looking for, in fact, it's better for you to crawl before you decide that you're going to be the next Wright brothers, and launch people to the moon. It'd really be better to clean up your own room, before you change the world, to quote a guy that's pretty popular right now with millennials. But starting small is important. In fact, it's way better to start small and overdo than overpromise and underdeliver. The biggest challenge, frankly, going into schools, and you'll be frustrated with schools if you think they're kind of slow and they're not utilizing. They have been promised stuff by people before. And so if you're going to start, it'd be far better to make sure you can deliver 3 helpers a week and stay with it than to promise 30 and deliver 3. You've got to be able to deliver what you start. And it's okay too to make mistakes and figure out, get better at this. I think we don't have a theology of failure or risk-taking that supports often, trying something new. We only celebrate this stuff, so we'll double down on stuff that we know is not working, but at least we know how to do it. So, we'll just write this sucker down. You know, it's like we'll get the band out one more time on the Titanic because we know how to do that. Okay. I want to say something else too about that I'll hang on to. What out of lunch before I turn the page about scorecard, anything else that you talked about or that I talked about this morning you wish I had or wish I hadn't? Do you have something that's on the front of your brain you want me to address before I turn the page? Yes, ma'am.
I appreciate your encouraging vision, to have vision.
Well, thank you. Is that a question?
It's a question.
I'll receive it as an affirmation. I'm teasing. I'm teasing. No, well, you know, here's the thing. Kingdom leaders. I have leaders sometimes that tell me. I had one of your tribe tell me this past week. I'm not big on vision. I'm not a real visionary. Most pastors would honestly rate themselves low on that. And all I would say to it is, you don't have to have the vision. You know, we don't create vision. Vision is discovered. We don't create it. You discover what vision God has for you.
That's really good.
And so that's the prayer part of praying with one eye open, I call it. You know, just paying attention to what's going on around you. You know, and assessing. In fact, I work with Good Cities, one of the organizations I work with, and we help people do appreciative inquiry. That's a fancy term for just asking questions and making sense out of the answers. Of community leaders telling them what one or two issues, if addressed, would have the biggest impact in our community. And you do that to 30, 40 grass tops leaders, you can get a pretty good idea of what it is that our central issues that really could be attacked with a collaborative effort. And so when you listen at that level, vision begins to emerge because the Spirit is always whispering a preferred future. We just have to listen. And part of us says, well, you don't have to know what to do to say yes. In fact, don't figure it out and then go, just say yes, now what? That's the right order of this. You have to just go. You just have to believe it and say yes. You know, and then what else? Well, here's what I want to talk about. I don't care what you want to ask about. I want to, let me just talk about this collective a little bit on this, let's just say you decide. I want to give you two levels of help here. One in the rest of our time before our next break. Let me talk about building a community collaborative, because some of you will actually want to do this. And so I'd like to give you some help at getting started. And the first thing I want to say is I'm going to use the language from the Stanford social impact group, because they've done a lot of work in what they call collective impact. And I think it's instructive. It gives us a language. It gives us a way to talk about it. Because if you were to take on foster parents, or some of these big issues, mental health. I've got a group of pastors in college, Pennsylvania, or whatever, College Station. No, that's A&M, Texas. State College, Pennsylvania. And as a group of pastors, they've decided mental health is going to be now. And by the way, if you're not listening, that's bigger than a huge problem. I mean, whether it's opioid crisis or whatever else, mental health issues, and I promise you, not 20 churches out of 100 are even talking about it. It's like we go to church and we're all fine, and the mental health issues are rampant in our congregation. I was in West Virginia about 3 months ago. 1 out of 6 families in the region that I was in has been impacted by the opioid crisis. Either one member of the family or 2 have been, and so the churches, there was the Methodist group that I was with saying, what can we do about the opioid crisis in this? So, you know, once you start, let's just say you're going to take on a societal ill like that, and you build a colony. Here's some things to pay attention to. The Stanford folks talk about some, what they call, stuff I can't remember anymore, but I'm wanting to say preconditions, that's it. And that you must have in order for collective impact to work. And so with my clients, with Good Cities and other Leadership Network and all, we talk about how do you create a sense of urgency. Now, Stanford says there are 3 of these preconditions. They're right, they missed 2. On urgency, they're absolutely right about this. And one of the things, and we'll talk about this on managing, which I'm going to come to your question, Michael, in the next session about organizational challenge, managing change or transition, whatever. But you've got to sell the problem. If people don't know what the problem is, if they don't know the why, they'll never want to come around the how or the what. And too frequently, we assume people either know the problem or whatever, but you've got to build this to a fever pitch. In fact, with all my clients, we figure out ways to create a better, how do you build some fire under this? If this is going to be the thing that we tackle or whatever. And so you have to create a sense of urgency. And then you have to have a good sense of your resources. And I can tell you that most church folks are too constrictive in their idea of what resources are available. There are government resources, there are family foundation resources, there is a whole range of stuff. We've been trying to finance everything off of plate offerings, and it's not enough resource. There are people in your community that actually want to live in a better community. We don't own a corner of the market on wanting a better community, and they will contribute to that if they know. We had a guy call, we were talking about this some years ago when I worked at a denominational place, and we were doing some new church planting experiments that didn't look like church planting, but looked like community development stuff. This was 15 years ago. And so this guy calls from Charleston, and he says, "Are y'all serious about this?" And yeah, I said, "We are. We're going to give this a whirl." And he said, "Well, I've got some money. I'm not a church guy." He said, "I don't go to church, and I don't have any affiliate, but I'm a builder in the area, and I want to invest in my city, and so I'm going to bring you some money." And he brought by, $250,000. And he said, "Now there's more." And Scott, excuse me, it was $150,000. He said, "There's more if you won't say where this came from." So we had to kill the receptionist and stuff. But they understood it was a worthy, But it wound up being a $250,000 gift, and that's from someone who has no church whatsoever. And there are people like that. And they're in your community. And their consideration is, I'm going to give the money to the group of people that can bring the return on investment, even if I have even a bias. I mean, Jim was telling me about this whole Oregon foster care thing being put in the hands of a Christian group when government typically doesn't turn to stuff that's faith-based and obviously faith-based, but they are so desperate in their need that they're willing to turn that whole foster care, this program that locating foster kids. How many, 6,000 kids or something like that, they're in that system. Am I not supposed to be telling this story? It just occurs to me.
Let's not put that on Facebook Live.
Okay, all right. It's too late.
We'll just ask Michael to pull that off. We don't want to blow it up in order.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, we can talk about it here.
Yeah. Well, that'll see. This is why technology is of the devil. Something you can't know the one thing you needed to know out of the entire day, and now we can't talk about it. All right, and all I'm saying is cast a wide net over resources, and many of you have heard about asset-based community development, ABCD. You know, this is part of it, locating the resources you have. Even in congregations, we help people figure out what are your people already involved in? Where are they already deployed, to use your word? I mean, there are congregations that have as high, in some of my work, 25% of the congregation may be in one industry in terms of education or healthcare. Well, you don't have to go on a vision quest and, you know, smoke peyote, sit, or get some cannabis and have a board meeting. Figure out what it is that God wants you to do. I mean, it's just kind of oh, I'm sorry. Is that an income stream that I'm telling you, God's for this as long as we go get the money. That's all I got to say. And an acre, my gosh. I don't know what you're ginning off of that property right now. But the other thing that the Stanford folks talk about is you got to have a champion or champions. And this is where I think they're right. But I would further I would break this into two. I think you have to have a convener as well. And I think their assumption is that the champion can actually call the party. It's been my experience that that's not necessarily the case. The mayor can call a party, but he may or she may not be the champion. Probably is not the champion. But they can put butts at the seats around the table to get a conversation going. And maybe you can do both roles where you are. And then I think, you would expect a consultant to believe this, but I think you also have to have someone identified as the facilitator, some coach, someone who can facilitate the conversation. Because what happens is, like in my own city, we got 7 agencies, working in the homeless. They can't even sit in the same room together because they're all trying to get their fork in the same meat, and everybody's trying to, get volunteer. And it just helps to have someone outside the system say, "That's great, Mary, appreciate that. Now, what have you got, Frank, over here?" Just someone that can shape the conversation so you can actually move the ball down the field. It's really critical to do. Now, there are then what I call the collaborative path, and I know this is just a drive-by shooting on this, but I'm just trying to fill up time because I don't know really anything about what the question that you asked. So let's just say, again, I'm going to use a different word. I think the collaborative path, here are the mile markers when you decide that you want to do something in your community as a group, and call the party or get someone who can call the party. Listen, it was in Redwood City, over there, Mid-Peninsula, San Francisco area, that I was working with a city council person there, and I thought they could be both things. I mean, this was a learning for me. And, so I'm really paying attention to this. Who can call this party? And I work with Salvation Army a lot. I think the Salvation Army could call. They're not seen. They're already in a neighborhood. They work with some of the least and lost. They're not considered competitors in most churches. I don't know who's seen this, and I love Salvation Army. Is what I'm trying to say. And but I think I'm talking with the state of Florida right now in their world about how can they, in 5 or 6 or 8 of their biggest cities, how could they call the party to bring the faith community and government and business and whatever else together? Let's just tackle these big problems we've got. You see, again, I'm going to confess something to you. I saw the last shuttle launch, not on site, but I was in Orlando, and I found out it was going, so I hustled everybody out to the pool. And any of you ever seen space launch, personal, up close? I had never. But when I saw that shuttle go off, and it was very plain, easy to see from where I was, I stood there and cried like a baby. I mean, something in me just, I said, you know, a group of people who can decide to do that, who can strap somebody to a bullet, you know, shoot them and bring them back. You know, we could solve any problem. We had the political will and you know, the capacity. You know, we could do this. In my one lifetime, as long as it is, 6 decades plus now, our narrative as a country has gone from we can to we can't. And God's people can step into this, I'm saying. If we don't step into this, who is going to step in? I mean, you know, now God's not, the arm of the Lord's not short. He's going to get some people into it. But I really think his heart's desire is for his people to take the banner on this. And because, so that's my bias. I honestly believe we can solve some big deals. But it's going to take people that are willing to spend some, you know, time and bring their competencies up to, because collaboration is hard. It takes a long time. It requires great patience and perseverance. But I can tell you the payoff in the end is way more better than you know, not doing a collaborative effort to make some problem go. All right, so here are the mile markers on a collaborative path. You have to do the work to establish a mutual agenda. And I told you there are multiple ways of doing that. You can interview grasstop leaders. You can, you know, or the Spirit may, the Lord just may be impressing you with something that, you know, doesn't need anybody else to talk about. But, you know, somebody's got to do this. This is what many leaders that I work with are driven that way, whether it's Jenny or you know, whoever. So, and by the way, don't be just, can I give you this? Let's just say you have folks from multiple domains sitting around the table, and let's say you decided literacy. I'll just pull that out there. Can I just tell you that it's still, that's not enough. That's not a closely shaped agenda enough to come around yet. It could take 12 to 18 months sometimes to figure. For instance, in literacy, what part of this do you want to bite off? Is it early childhood development? Is it food challenge for the weekend and summers? Is it summer reading? Is it after school programming? Is it parental engagement? See, there are multiple streams of issues that typically feed, you know, a particular issue. Or you get into one thing and you suddenly discover there's another whole field of work over here to be done. So this can take, you know, some months and a fair amount of conversation in order to clarify and crystallize a mutual agenda. Then you have to have shared measurement. And again, I've spent a lot of my last year and a half working with a research guy over in, well, he's finishing up at Baylor. He's done work at Taylor and some other places over, you know, I think, and we're pretty close to releasing something that'll be actually free, because we've had some benefactors to help communities build dashboards so that they can tell the impact that they're having. And help agencies do program evaluation so that we'll know if we're actually delivering, we're seeing a result from what we're doing, or are we just throwing money at it, or are we just doing the same old stuff, or, you know, what's the ROI on that? But you know, for instance, let's just keep literacy, for instance. I'll just run it all the way through. So you decided literacy. I've got a client that did the food challenge into that, backpacks. 3 different metrics that were shared. You know, test scores went up, attendance went up, and trips to the school nurse went down. Those are measurements that we followed to make sure that it was having the impact. And sure enough, you feed kids protein, you feed their brains, you give it matters. It really matters. So And then there have to be what I'm going to call mutually reinforcing activities. And don't worry about the fact that you can't read it back there, because I can't read it right here. This is post-lunch. I just don't really care, and I'm feeling a dip in the energy in the room because I'm getting really technical now. And people are looking at their watch more and more. And I just have a feeling that we need something pretty significant the next break. Some real sugar. Sugar and carbs. It's going to be really important for us to everybody get a handful of rice. Bring it back in here. We'll clean up later. But you're there again. Say literacy.
Literacy.
No, you don't have to say literacy. Man, this crowd has gone to a mindless stage. I have numbed you completely to the point. Oh man, that is scary. That is all kinds of scary. If you don't cut off that darn Facebook, I'm going to cut off for you. All right, so, anyway, don't say what I'm about to say. Let's just say you were doing a project in literacy. And let's just say you were doing a summer reading focus. One of the mutually reinforcing activities is, and everybody could do this, you could each do this. We know that summer reading, if a kid has 3 or 4 books that they can read over the summer, they won't have that 2-month regression or 1-month regression, depending on where they are. I mean, book drives are easy. And I'm not talking about letting your folks clean out their attics with children. I mean, work with the school system, or write checks. I mean, the schools can buy and distribute the books. I mean, but just make it possible for kids to go home. I've got Titus County right now. They're gearing. What month is this? October. Yeah, they finished up. Doesn't matter. Every kid through 8th grade had 4 books they could take home over the last break, and that were graded whatever. Thank you, appropriate. And work with the school. So all right. But what we did this past summer is mutually reinforcing activities. With those books, we also added an hour to the Parks and Recreation summer day camp that really involves the kids. We added an hour of literacy for people to read to the kids. During the kids are already there 9 to 11. We just stuck another hour on. And then we added literacy readers to the summer feeding program that picked up at noon at 3 of the churches in town, where the kids who we feed also all year long, free and reduced lunch, and then weekend backpacks, had a place to eat during the summer, and had readers with them. Those kind of mutually reinforcing activities, by the way, not only do they help you achieve your goal, but they also give other domains a way in. It's an on-ramp for some other people to get engaged. Communication has to be this, you just have to over-communicate. And I think it was important to write a word you cannot read to make the point about communication, how critical it is. But this is what people hear and see if they're not getting the adequate kinds of stuff. And I can tell you that communication is the lifeblood of collaborative efforts. So if you have a I have to invent it here mentality, or everything has to come back here mentality, it's never going to get done. There has to be an over-community. And then there has to be something else that I can't quite remember to say, but I'm just going to use backbone support. And you really only have 3 options here. Start something, repurpose something that already exists, or improve something that's already working. We had a ministerial alliance in Northeast Texas that was basically defunct, except for having the annual Thanksgiving service where no one wanted to attend, and but they all passed it around, Y'all have those?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's really just a preacher fest, because who gets to be the honored speaker this year, kind of thing. And, but they weren't doing anything else. It turned into Titus County Cares. Now we're talking about 1,150 backpacks a week, people getting help with hunger, families, people getting help with their utility bills, on and on and on. I could just go. And so we repurposed an organization at that point. Redwood City, we started the Peninsula Literacy Coalition. We couldn't figure out why this thing wouldn't go for a while, on trying to get churches involved in literacy. And we finally figured out that there were about 11 different mom and pop organizations that were already working that space.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things we've got to remember is, just because we've now suddenly got an itch, this is true of evangelicals across the board. We feel like we've just discovered justice and social, and mercy. And, Catholic Charities have been at it for 2,000 years. Could you talk to the Catholics about, could we undo the Reformation at this point and just find out where people are already working, and who's got the knowledge base, and who's established, and all that kind of stuff. We don't have to be the heroes of every story. And so, and that's what we did there. When we finally made that decision, everyone came to the table and we established a coalition. All right. Yes, ma'am. Please get us out of this. Ask a question and maybe talk about something else.
You had 3 points: start something, repurpose something, and what was the third one?
And that's to improve something it just come alongside something that's already in that space,
Okay.
and just bolster it, so you're not really repurposing it.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, just join them in a sense, or add to, catalyze, synergize around, or whatever word you want to use. Now, this is for those of you who we don't pick up this community development stuff in our seminaries and in our Bible colleges.
True.
But in kingdom work, we're going to have to add these competencies to our, or recruit these competencies. Let's say you're not the person, but somebody in your organization, somebody or some bodies, can help with this. And I'm just trying to position you for the very best kind of engagement that you want to have. And this is what every effort that I'm aware of, that I'm dealing with and helping people get done, this is the hard work that has to get done. But it's worth it, because more people are engaged and people's lives are made better. And you have stuff to celebrate. Any other question about? Because what I'd like to do is take a break, because everyone in this room needs it. I can tell you, there are people that the last 5 minutes have been the hardest time of your life to try to stay away. I mean, I can feel it. And some of you quit trying. You're just now waking up to try to look like something, so you can shuffle out, get in front of other people that are needing a break. So, grace for all, whether or not you need it or not. Let's come back 5 minutes early from our break, and that'll give me 5 more minutes on the other side, because I know I need to speak so many words to get paid.
All right, we'll take a break. 25 minutes after the hour. We'll be back in here. 25 minutes after the hour, right? 5 minutes early.
I started to suggest something we can shout it out.
That's a long break.
Let's have a
Yeah, that is a long break. It's too much. You need to get, he's right.
I'm a friend of Paul. We're going to make an executive decision. We're going to do a 15-minute break, and then we'll finish early, okay? So 15-minute break. We'll be back here 15 minutes past the hour, and then we'll finish early.
And then we're going to put a study group on that recommendation.
Run it through the board. We need to form a committee. And then got to run it through the board.
Pastor Michael.
That was hard week, huh? No, it's just a hard trip home.
Unless you wanted to.